My mother said the emergency dental work would cost $3,200. Cash only. I nodded and wrote the check while Emma smiled at me across our mother's kitchen table. Then my phone buzzed. Fraud alert from Chase Bank. Someone had just transferred $2,300 from my business account. I stared at the notification. The transfer happened exactly 47 minutes ago, right around the time I walked into this house. Sarah? Mom's voice cut through my thoughts. You look pale, honey. Are you feeling all right? I looked up at the three faces watching me. Mom with her concerned expression that never quite reached her eyes. Emma twirling her new Tiffany bracelet, the one she definitely couldn't afford on a marketing coordinator's salary. Jake leaning against the counter, that smirk he always wore when he thought he knew something I didn't. I'm fine, I said, folding the check in half. Just work stuff. But I wasn't fine. For the first time in 15 years of being this family's ATM, something felt wrong. Let me back up. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I'm 34 years old. I'm a certified public accountant living in Phoenix, Arizona. I own my townhome outright, drive a 3-year-old Honda Accord, and haven't taken a real vacation in 6 years. Not because I can't afford it, but because every time I plan something for myself, someone in my family has an emergency. It started when I was 19. Dad died suddenly, leaving Mom with $40,000 in medical debt and a mortgage she couldn't pay. Emma was only 14, still in high school. Someone had to step up. Someone responsible. Someone who understood numbers and budgets and sacrifice. That someone was me. I worked my way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, graduated summa cum laude, and immediately started sending money home. First, it was the mortgage payments on the childhood home Mom couldn't bear to sell. Then Emma's car when she turned 16. Then Mom's back surgery when the insurance only covered 60%. Then Emma's college tuition because her grades weren't quite good enough for the scholarships I'd earned. The requests kept coming. Emma's credit card debt from her experimental phase in college, $11,000. Mom's new roof after the monsoon damage, $8,500. Emma's wedding to Jake, $6,000 for the photographer alone. Emma's car payment when she decided she needed an SUV for her image, $450 a month for 3 years. I said yes to everything. Every single request, because I was the responsible one. The one with the steady job and the good credit and no husband or kids to worry about. Because Mom would get that look, the one that said I was selfish for even hesitating. Because Emma would cry and say she didn't know what she'd do without me. Because somewhere deep down, I still believed that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, took care of everyone enough, I might finally be the daughter Mom looked at with pride instead of obligation. But sitting in that kitchen with my phone buzzing fraud alerts, something shifted. The check in my hand felt heavier. Emma's new bracelet caught the light. Jake's smirk seemed more knowing than usual. David had been telling me for months to look closer at these emergencies. David Chun, my colleague at the accounting firm, had grown up with narcissistic parents and recognized the patterns I couldn't see. Sarah, he'd said just last week, when was the last time Emma actually showed you a medical bill? Or a repair estimate? You're an accountant. You know better than anyone that legitimate expenses come with documentation. But I'd brushed him off. These were family emergencies, not client audits. Family meant trust. Family meant taking people at their word. Except now my business account was missing $2,300 and I hadn't authorized any transfers. I need to make a phone call, I said, standing up from the kitchen table. Now, Mom's voice had that sharp edge that usually made me sit back down. We haven't even had dessert yet. Emma brought that chocolate cake you love. It'll just take a minute. I walked outside to the backyard where I used to play as a kid, back when this house felt like home instead of a crime scene. I called the fraud department. The representative, Maria, was professional and thorough. Mrs. Martinez, we show several unauthorized transfers from your business account over the past 6 months. Small amounts, usually between $800 and $2,500. The pattern suggests someone with access to your personal information. My hands went cold. How many transfers total? $23,450. The number hit me like a physical blow. I sat down hard on the patio chair Dad built when I was 12. $23,000 gone, stolen, from my business account that only I should have access to. Mrs. Martinez? Are you still there? Yes, I whispered. I need to know the dates of these transfers. She read them off. I grabbed a pen from my purse and wrote them on the back of a receipt. January 15th, February 3rd, February 28th, March 12th. The dates blurred together at first, then snapped into focus. January 15th. The day after I gave Mom $1,800 for her physical therapy bills. February 3rd. 2 days after I covered Emma's emergency vet bill for her cat. February 28th. The same week I paid Emma's rent when she was between paychecks. March 12th. Right after I gave Mom $2,200 for her medication costs. Every single transfer happened within days of me writing a check to my family. Someone was double dipping, getting money from my account electronically while I was also handing over checks for the same expenses. I need to report this as identity theft, I told Maria, and I need copies of everything. Of course. We'll start an investigation immediately and reverse any unauthorized charges we can verify. You should also file a police report. Police. The word should have felt scary, but instead it felt like relief. Someone with authority was going to look at this objectively. Someone who dealt with financial crimes for a living. I hung up and sat in the backyard for 10 more minutes, watching the sun set behind the mountains. My childhood home looked different now. The mortgage I'd been paying for 8 years so Mom could keep it. The new air conditioning unit I bought last summer. The landscaping I'd paid for so Mom wouldn't be embarrassed by the neighbors. How much of my life had I poured into this house? Into this family? How much of myself had I given away, one check at a time? When I went back inside, Emma was cutting cake. She looked up with her brightest smile. There you are. I saved you the biggest piece. The cake was chocolate with raspberry filling, expensive, from the bakery downtown that charged $35 for a single layer cake. Emma was unemployed 6 months ago when I lent her $4,000 for job interview clothes. Now she was buying $35 cakes for Sunday dinner. Emma, I said, sitting back down. How's your tooth feeling? She blinked. My tooth? The one that needed emergency dental work. The $3,200 procedure. Oh, she touched her cheek absently. Much better. Dr. Rodriguez is amazing. Which tooth was it? Another blink? The back one. Molar. Upper or lower? Does it matter? Her laugh was too bright, too quick. It's fixed now. I nodded and ate my cake. It tasted like nothing. The next morning, I called Dr. Rodriguez's office. Emma had been a patient there, but her last appointment was 8 months ago for a routine cleaning. No recent work. No emergency procedures. No $3,200 bill. I hung up and stared at the check I'd written yesterday. Still folded in my purse, not yet deposited. Proof of what, exactly? That my sister was a liar? That my family saw me as a piggy bank instead of a person? David found me in my office at lunch, staring at spreadsheets I'd created to track every penny I'd given my family over the years. The numbers were staggering. $87,643 over 15 years. Not counting the mortgage payments, which added another $68,000. Not counting the cosign loans that were still active. Jesus, Sarah. David pulled up a chair. You could have bought a lake house with that money. Or retired 5 years early, I said. Or taken that trip to Europe I've been planning since college. What are you going to do? I looked at the computer screen. All those numbers, all those sacrifices, all those times I'd said no to myself so I could say yes to them. I'm going to find out exactly what I've been paying for. The investigation took 3 weeks. I approached it like any other audit, methodical and thorough. I pulled bank records, credit reports, insurance statements. I made phone calls. I visited offices. I documented everything. What I found was so much worse than a few fake emergencies. The dental work was just the beginning. The physical therapy bills Mom claimed were so expensive, paid for entirely by her insurance. She'd been pocketing my money while going to court-ordered sessions for free through her disability claim. Speaking of which, Mom's disability was partially fraudulent. She'd been working part-time as a house cleaner for 3 years, earning cash under the table while collecting disability payments for a back injury that had healed. Emma's emergency vet bills. Her cat was perfectly healthy. The emergency rent payments. She'd been receiving rental assistance from the county while telling me she was behind on payments. The job interview clothes. She'd bought them, then returned them after getting the job, keeping my money for a shopping spree that included the Tiffany bracelet. But the worst discovery came when I pulled my credit report. Emma had opened 4 credit cards using my information as a reference, inflating her income and using my address for verification. She'd accumulated $37,000 in debt across those cards, debt I knew nothing about but was technically liable for as the reference. Jake's crime was different but equally disturbing. Remember how he always seemed to know things about my work, about my clients and their businesses? I found a digital recorder in my purse after one family dinner, tiny and nearly invisible. He'd been recording my conversations about client information and selling details to their competitors. Industrial espionage. That's what Detective Maria Santos called it when I brought her the recorder and the bank records and the insurance fraud documentation. Detective Santos worked financial crimes for Phoenix PD, and she took my case seriously from the start. "This isn't family drama," she said, looking through my evidence. "This is systematic fraud, identity theft, and corporate espionage. How long has this been going on?" 15 years, I said. "But I only figured it out 3 weeks ago." Detective Santos nodded grimly. "The good news is you've documented everything perfectly. The bad news is you're looking at a minimum of $70,000 in direct theft, not counting the credit card debt and the business information he sold. $70,000. More than I made in a year after taxes. Gone. Stolen by the people who were supposed to love me. What happens now?" I asked. "Now we build a case, and you decide how far you want to take this." I knew what she was asking. Did I want to press charges against my own family? Did I want to involve prosecutors in courts and potentially send my mother and sister to jail? 3 weeks ago, the answer would have been no. Family was family. You protected each other. You forgave each other. You worked things out privately. But that was before I understood the scope of what they'd done. Before I realized that while I'd been sacrificing my 20s and 30s to take care of them, they'd been systematically robbing me blind. Before I understood that their emergencies were manufactured crises designed to fund their lifestyle while I worked 60-hour weeks and skipped vacations. I wanted to take it as far as the law allows, I told Detective Santos. She smiled. "Good, because these people aren't going to stop until they face real consequences." The confrontation happened on a Sunday, just like always. Except this time, I wasn't bringing a check. I was bringing a police report, bank records, and an insurance investigator. I walked into Mom's kitchen, my kitchen, the one I'd been paying for with Detective Santos and Agent Miller from the Insurance Fraud Division. Emma was there with Jake, as usual. They looked up expectantly when I came in. "Sarah," Mom said, that familiar manipulation already creeping into her voice. "Why do you look so serious? And who are your friends?" "Detective Santos, Phoenix Police Financial Crimes. Agent Miller, State Insurance Fraud Investigation. They're here to ask you some questions." The color drained from Mom's face. Emma started to stand up, then sat back down. Jake looked toward the back door, like he was considering running. "This is ridiculous," Mom said, but her voice was shaking. "Sarah, what have you done?" "I documented the theft," I said calmly. $70,000 over 15 years. Identity theft, insurance fraud, wire fraud, and industrial espionage. Emma burst into tears. Not the calculated tears she used to manipulate me, but real panic. Sarah, please. We can work this out. We don't need police. Actually, we do, Detective Santa said, taking out her notepad. Mrs. Martinez, are you Linda Martinez? Currently receiving disability benefits for a back injury sustained in 2019. What followed was 3 hours of questions, denials, more questions, and finally confessions. Mom broke first, admitting to the insurance fraud, but claiming she only worked a few hours here and there, and never meant to hurt anyone. Emma's story fell apart when they showed her the credit card statements and bank records. Jake actually tried to deny the recording until Agent Miller played back one of my conversations about a client's merger plans. By the end of it, all three were facing charges. Mom for insurance fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Emma for identity theft, wire fraud, and credit card fraud. Jake for industrial espionage and violation of attorney-client privilege. Sarah, Mom said as the officers prepared to leave. You're destroying your family over money? Is that really worth it? I looked at her, this woman who had birthed me, raised me, and then spent 15 years systematically stealing from me. This woman who had taught me that love meant sacrifice, while never sacrificing anything herself. You destroyed our family the first time you decided I was worth more to you as a victim than as a daughter, I said. I'm just making sure there's documentation. The consequences were real and permanent. Mom lost her disability benefits and faced 2 years probation plus restitution. She had to sell the house to pay back the insurance company and my stolen money. Emma filed for bankruptcy and faced 18 months in prison, suspended if she paid full restitution over 5 years. Jake lost his job and faced deportation back to Canada when his work visa was revoked. I changed my phone number, my address, and my bank accounts. I hired a lawyer to handle the civil lawsuits and a security company to monitor my credit. I went completely no contact with all of them. The hardest part wasn't the legal process or the money. It was realizing how much of my identity had been built around being their savior. Who was I if I wasn't the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who always said yes? It took 6 months of therapy to start answering that question. Turns out I was someone who liked hiking and wine tasting and traveling to places where nobody knew my phone number. I was someone who could date without worrying about how much my boyfriend's dinner cost. I was someone who could save for retirement and plan for my own future instead of constantly managing other people's crises. David and I started dating 8 months after the police report. He'd been waiting patiently while I figured out who I was without my family's chaos defining me. Our first real date was dinner at a restaurant I'd always wanted to try but never could afford because Emma always had an emergency that month. The pasta was incredible. I bought a new house a year later. 2 bedrooms, mountain views, and a security system with an unlisted address. I furnished it slowly, choosing pieces I actually liked instead of whatever was cheapest. I hung art on the walls and planted flowers in the garden. I made it mine. Emma tried to contact me exactly 18 months after her sentencing. A letter forwarded through my lawyer asking if we could rebuild our relationship now that she'd learned from her mistakes. She was pregnant, she said. Her first child. She wanted her baby to know its aunt. I read the letter once, sitting in my kitchen with morning coffee and mountain views. Then I fed it to the shredder without a second thought. Some people might say I was too harsh. That family deserves second chances. That holding grudges only hurts yourself. Those people have never had their trust systematically exploited for 15 years by the people who were supposed to love them most. I don't miss the chaos. I don't miss the phone calls at midnight about new emergencies. I don't miss choosing between my own needs and their manufactured crises. I don't miss being seen as a resource instead of a person. I do miss the fantasy of what our relationship could have been. I miss having a family that actually cared about my well-being instead of my wallet. But you can't miss something that never really existed. These days, I work reasonable hours and take real vacations. I have friends who ask how I'm doing and actually wait for the answer. I have a retirement account that grows every month instead of being emptied for other people's problems. I have a life that belongs to me. Sometimes I run into people who knew my family and they ask why we don't speak anymore. I tell them we had irreconcilable differences about financial boundaries. Most people nod and change the subject. The ones who push for details usually have their own stories about toxic family members. You did the right thing, David told me last week when a mutual friend asked about my estranged family. You chose yourself for once. That's not selfish. That's survival. He's right. For 34 years, I thought love meant sacrifice. I thought being good meant giving until it hurt. I thought family meant accepting whatever treatment they decided to give me. Now I know better. Love is reciprocal. Goodness includes protecting yourself from people who would harm you. And family is what you choose to build with people who actually value you. The girl who wrote that first check 15 years ago was trying to earn love through money. She thought if she just gave enough, sacrificed enough, proved her worth enough, she'd finally be enough. The woman I am now knows she was already enough. She just needed to find people who could see it. What do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough?